What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. The new champion TALIYAH is out on the PBE and I got a chance to mess around with her and try her out a little bit and give you guys my thoughts. She's a really cool and interesting champion and I'm really fond of the way that she was designed as a whole. I got a chance to take a look at her in pretty much every role you might think of, and I'm here to bring you guys my thoughts for just how good TALIYAH is shaping up to be. And as always, if you guys enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button, and if you don't enjoy the video, hit that dislike. And let's get started. So TALIYAH is a champion that is very much designed to be a control mage, and as a result, functions somewhat similarly in playstyle to that of champions like Viktor and Anivia. Control mages involve using zones to aggressively influence the positioning of your opponents, while also outputting damage with a decent amount of utility. And control mages are really awesome in my opinion because they're probably one of the most well-designed playstyles a champion can have in League of Legends. She doesn't have any super frustrating mechanics to play against, and her kit is really healthy and fair to play against too, while at the same time control mages are very complex strategically in terms of positioning and using your abilities. Although control mages might not always be the most complex champions in terms of mechanics, in terms of the strategy to use your abilities and make plays, they are some of the most in-depth when it comes to that category. Because often the control mages involve a lot of really slow but also super powerful skill shots that are typically easy to dodge and as a result require you to, instead of just throwing them out at will and hoping they land, they require you to set up, predict, and manipulate your opponents to force them into positions where your skill shots land, which is a really awesome playstyle to design a champion for. TALIYAH is a pretty unique control mage in the sense that she lacks a lot of the damage, especially some of the burst damage that a lot of the control mages have, most notably Viktor. She definitely does a bit less damage, and as compensation, she's given a little bit better utility. Not necessarily more utility, but the utility that she does have is a lot more impactful and powerful to create plays if you can actually land it properly. Let's take a look at her abilities. Her passive gives her bonus movement speed when moving next to walls, and this is kind of a boring ability, but it's cool to like surf around on a rock, and the passive gives you a bit of breathing room before it actually deactivates, allowing you to use it to get back to lane a lot faster, as well as to roam around to other lanes. So it might not be that exciting or interesting, but it's reasonably useful, and helps give her a bit more presence around the map without any downsides. You just have to remember to make sure that you're actually walking next to a wall, rather than down the middle of a lane or something when walking around on the map. Her Q is probably the bread and butter of her kit. It's going to be what you want to max outside of just putting points into your ultimate whenever possible. And this ability has a lot of dynamics to it that gives you a bunch of different options. It fires out 5 projectiles with a relatively high range that do a pretty solid amount of damage. The first hit on a target does some pretty nice poke, and additional projectiles hit on the same target do 50% reduced damage. In addition, it also places a zone on the ground that lasts for 3 minutes and gives her bonus movement speed when she's moving through it. If you cast the Q inside one of those zones, instead of firing 5 projectiles, you fire only 1, but you're refunded half of the mana cost. So you can set up the zones and then use the angles to CS and save a bit of mana, but it's also kind of weird to play around since it definitely does lower the damage output of the ability quite a lot, but it's necessary since she does run out of mana somewhat quickly. However, if you're using the Q for the 5 projectiles and you manage to land 3 or more on a target, it's really going to be doing an insane amount of damage for a basic ability. You proc your Thunderlords, and you can really chunk people out, although landing that many projectiles on the target is easier said than done, but this aspect makes Rylai's a pretty core item on her, since by giving her Q a slow, it makes landing 4 or 5 of the projectiles on a champion quite easy actually, as long as you hit the first one. As well, the hitbox width is pretty generous, definitely larger than the animation, and it hits in a small AoE radius, so it kind of works for wave clear and potentially harassing through creeps, and is a really cool ability to play with that is her main source of power. Her W is probably my favorite ability on her kit. This is her main source of utility that I mentioned earlier, when it comes to the fact that she doesn't really have more or less utility in her kit than other mages, but the utility she does have is maybe a little bit more impactful, since her W is almost like a mini ranged Alistar headbutt that can go in any direction. Although it is a little bit difficult to land, being able to bump an opponent into your team at a pretty significant range actually is really awesome, and it's quite powerful. And it's a great ability to set up combos, create picks, maybe disengage, and manipulate your opponents. It has a lot of versatility, but also a pretty big delay on it, so it's quite difficult to land. And that's actually pretty interesting because it makes the ability really fair. It's difficult to land, but a big part of her strategy revolves around it. Since getting hit with the W counts as a dash, it also procs the second half of the damage on her E, and allows you to combo to land a lot of damage on a target. Typically when you land a W on someone, you should, at least in theory, be able to land pretty much your entire ability combo on them. So a really big part of her playstyle involves manipulating your opponent's movements in order to force them into a position to put them in a spot where dodging the W is nearly impossible, which results in a pretty sweet strategic playstyle. Her E is what I think might be the most interesting ability on her kit. Now this ability does like an okay amount of damage, and it has a 4-second delay on its reactivation for the second round of damage. 4 seconds is obviously a massive delay, and I talked about this mechanic of giving an ability a delay a couple days ago, and we can really see this mechanic in this ability on TALIYAH as well. And in addition, if someone uses a dash within the zone of her E, it procs the second part of the damage instantly, but it doesn't stop the dash. However, landing her W also counts as a dash, so those two abilities kind of combo together. Now the main reason why I think this ability is interesting is because of how short the range actually is. Whereas every single other ability on our kit is actually quite long range, this ability is ridiculously short range, which is actually pretty cool since it gives her incentive to put her in a position where she is maybe a little bit closer to the fight and a little bit more at risk. As a result, she benefits a decent amount from tank stats, so a proper build on her is probably some form of hybrid AP build, maybe like a Rod of Ages first, then a Rylai's and an Abyssal Scepter, a Zhonya's, and then a Rabadon's or Void Staff somewhere in there. Don't pay attention to my builds in the video though, because whenever I play champions on the PB, I'm basically just trying out a whole bunch of random garbage that usually ends up sucking, but it's a good way to learn a lot about the champion quickly. And in teamfights, a lot of the positioning and manipulation with the rest of her kit can allow you to land that second proc of the E, especially on tanks or champions that are easily kited, and even if you can't, the first part still does relevant damage and it gives her some nice wave clear. And her ultimate is definitely the coolest ability on her kit. This ability took a while for me to get used to, and I'll be honest, I kinda messed it up a lot since it's a little bit slower than I'd expected it to be, but it essentially creates this huge wall of impassable terrain at a massive range. So much so to where you can just wall off an entire area. You can wall off escape routes of an opponent in lane completely, which makes it an awesome tool for ganking. And you can wall off people to maybe be stuck inside of the Baron Pit. Think of it as like a massive semi-global Anivia wall. But what's great is that you can use it as like a pseudo teleport kind of ability to travel somewhere really fast, and you can also deactivate the wall at any time in case you mess it up, or if the positioning of the players change to where the wall is more of a burden. The wall lasts for 6 seconds, and when you're riding on it, you can also jump off at any time. So as a result, it's quite versatile, but the range on it and the plays you can make with it are actually pretty hilarious, and it's really awesome. From using it to travel to a fight faster, to completely cutting off an escape route for ganks, to maybe zoning out an opponent from a fight completely and then splitting them off into separate groups, this ultimate is a really awesome ability that also has a pretty high skill cap too, and it gives her a lot of hilarious but also pretty good playmaking potential. It doesn't do any damage though, and the fact that it doesn't is a big part of why I say that TALIYAH in general is maybe a little bit lower in damage than other control mages, but her damage overall is still quite alright. She just maybe lacks the one-shot burst combo of a control mage like Victor or Anivia might potentially have on some targets that get caught out. But yeah, I mean, her ultimate is awesome. It's just that her all-in playstyle isn't really enough to kill someone from full HP, and that results in a fairly strategic playstyle instead. Her laning phase is pretty interesting since she does lack that burst damage, but she has a lot of nice harass, and using her Q can be quite effective, and she performs well versus mostly immobile champions since she is fairly skillshot reliant. But her laning phase is alright, and her wave clear is pretty solid since although her E has maybe a pretty long delay, it's not actually that big of a deal when you're using it to just wave clear. Her roams are great, and her team fighting is really interesting since there's a lot of strategic things you can do through manipulating opponents and zone control to just carry fights completely. TALIYAH is definitely designed for the mid lane, but she does have some potential in other roles too. She has a fair amount of utility, so maybe she has potential in support, and her tools for ganking are great, so she has potential in the jungle as well. And since she kind of works off of a tanky hybrid kind of style, I wouldn't be surprised to see her having success in the top lane too. It's hard to know if her utility will still be useful enough without the damage though, and I'm leaning a bit towards no, since although her W is awesome, it's really difficult to land if your other abilities aren't actually threatening. So I don't think we'll see her on support, and in jungle she maybe lacks a bit of the wave clear you would want from a decent jungler. And the control mage style in general is one that's just much better suited for the mid lane, and with her ultimate and the passive roaming on her that's so powerful, her meta role is almost certainly going to be mid lane, and I'm not entirely confident that she'll be successful in other roles, although she definitely does have some potential. Overall though, the design of TALIYAH is something that I am personally really impressed by. She really does not feel overpowered at all, but she also doesn't feel underpowered. She's probably one of, if not the most balanced champions in terms of gameplay design that I've seen come out for a really long time. Her design is really awesome, and she really feels great to not only play as, but also to play against. And she has a pretty high skill cap, which makes her have a lot of potential to be powerful at the competitive level, and just in general. I really don't think she's overpowered, and she might not even be that strong honestly, but she definitely feels really balanced, which is pretty cool to see, and it says a lot about the design of the character, so big props to the lead designer Daniel Klein, who also designed Azir, Tahm Kench, Lucian, and the Xerath rework. He did a great job with TALIYAH, and I'm looking forward to her release and would recommend her to anyone looking to try out a new control mage once she hits the live servers, which should be in about 2 weeks from the day that I'm uploading this video. And that's going to be it. Thanks for watching, subscribe if you want, and I'll see you guys next time.